Welcome to the Corporate Baddie Podcast, your go-to resource for real talk, hard-earned wisdom, and actionable insights from women who are transforming the advertising and media landscape. I'm Jen Warner, your host. After spending 20 years in the media and ad tech space, I now channel my expertise into recruiting and consulting across the corporate landscape, helping businesses navigate complex challenges and seize new opportunities. Whether you're climbing the ladder or already navigating the upper echelons, we're going to dive into the journeys, challenges, and triumphs that define what it means to be a true corporate baddie. I'm delighted to introduce today's special guest, Sarah Dale, a trailblazing leader dedicated to empowering high-performing women through her innovative initiatives. As the founder of Project 1490, Sarah has established a dynamic membership community designed to nurture all facets of women. Project 1490 offers a unique opportunity for women to transcend their limits, build resilience, and realize their full potential. Her career spans over 3 decades in advertising and media, where she held pivotal sales leadership roles in esteemed organizations such as Business Week and the Wall Street Journal. Notably, she served as the Chief Revenue Officer at Nativo, a leading ad tech company, where she oversaw the company's buy-side media division, contributing to a significant revenue growth. Sarah's journey exemplifies the harmonious blend of professional excellence and personal passion, making her a true Renaissance woman. Her dedication to fostering badassery in herself and others continues to inspire women to break boundaries and achieve unparalleled success and happiness. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today. We're really excited to have another corporate baddie join us. I am really thrilled to have you here today because I think you have a really dynamic background and a unique journey. And with that, I want to just kind of set the premise of the podcast because we can go in a lot of different directions. And I really want us to focus, at least at the onset, focus on inspiring those that are looking to get into the media and advertising business. So maybe that younger next gen, but also giving some lessons and advice to those that are maybe mid-career and senior executives that are just looking to get something out of this conversation today from a senior executive such as yourself. And then we're going to transition to where you are today and what's going on in your world around Project 1490, because that's really exciting. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about how you got started in this industry.
Thanks. Thank you for having me, Jen. This is great. I'm happy to. I got started very early in my career. I was lucky because my dad was a client in the industry, and I was very opposed to having his help. But he did connect me with Fortune magazine when I was a kid. I was like 16, 17 years old. And I got an internship that I worked all through college and then after college. And that really, set me on a whole course for a very long advertising career. And I didn't really know at 17 that that's what it was going to do for my career. But I just worked really hard on, I do anything from clean the closet to, edit bios for their events. And I learned a ton.
That's
And
amazing.
I really encourage people to get internships when they're, or our kids to do it and all of that, because it really does have a huge effect.
I couldn't agree more. I think for me, I didn't have that experience. I really didn't have an internship of any sorts or guidance from my family to where I should be thinking about taking my career. So I kind of stumbled into it in the sense that I really loved magazines and I loved flipping the pages. And I recall always kind of flipping the magazine from back to front and just stopping on the ads. And I was like, wait, there's something here. Like, who sells this? And so later in my career, after I'd gotten some sales experience under my belt, I found myself in the industry, which was kind of cool.
That's so great.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mentioned the bios that I had to edit for the Fortune Global Summit and the Education Summit they used to have. And I saw at that time, all the CEOs were like old white men.
Yeah.
And in editing their bios, there were two things that the way they started was either in the military or in sales. And so I thought, well, I'm not going into the military, so I'll go into sales. And I was like, well, I'll go into ad sales. There's this thing called ad sales. But I was interviewing for jobs for ad sales when I was graduating, and I really didn't have any clue as to like what the process was or what the job was. So I ended up talking to a lot of people who had that job to really start getting me educated. Even though I'd had an internship and been around it, I really needed to understand, like, what do you mean you call on the agency? And what do you mean, like, and really peel it apart. So I was lucky to have those connections to do that by the time I was graduating.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that like the sales profession, not many of us are really truly trained in it, right?
Yeah.
I was fortunately, I think I'm a last of a dying breed, to be honest, but I recognize that many young sales executives that are getting into our industry truly haven't been necessarily trained for that discipline and really do have to seek a lot of advice and really need a strong leader. I know that your career obviously progressed from the days of internship at Fortune and you quickly rose the ranks and became a leader yourself. Tell me a little bit about like your leadership style and helping maybe some of those that are just getting into sales kind of truly understand what that discipline is and how to be successful.
That's a great question. I
Mhm.
I think my leadership style is really based on being who I am. The word authentic comes up so often these days. I feel like we, have almost lost our meaning around it. But I do think that, when I learned to really be true to myself and what I thought was right, and having empathy for other people who are on my team, I really think that that is part of it, and it's being straight, because you learn a lot from the people who are above you, for better and for worse. And I always found that I appreciated knowing where I stood, knowing, what the direction was and what my role in helping us get there was. So I feel like when I became a manager and then became sort of a sales leader, I really took that to heart, and tried to be, as transparent as I possibly could be with people on my team.
Love that. Something that I just noted you saying was you first were a manager and
Yeah.
then you made the pivot to sales leader. There is a definite distinction between the two. So I'd love to understand kind of your POV on that and then how you made that transition.
Yeah, we'll talk about something else that people aren't really trained in. You do a good job in your independent contributor role, and then somebody taps you for management, and you get very little training for the most part, to make that transition. And there's a lot in that initial transition. You lose some friends, like people who don't see you as a peer anymore. There's lots of difficulty in it. And then realizing, I remember the first time I realized that I was the one running the meeting.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, whoa, like, I sort of relying on other people to do that for me for a while. So, that it is a big transition. And I think that, it comes with, like, am I going to be good at this? I was good at sales, but am I going to be good at managing people? And so that in and of itself, I think for me, the distinction is when I really became a leader was, I had some things to call on in myself that I had built. And, I understood a little bit more about how to bring people together. And I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit more, really.
Mhm.
But that was from experience.
Absolutely. Experience definitely. I think that, first time managers, like you said, you're not really trained. And some of that leads to a little bit of like, I guess, feeling that you're a micromanager because you feel like you have to be in the weeds and you are a part of every conversation and every decision. And the reality is, you have to really learn to trust your sales team or any team for that matter and kind of step away and delegate and then truly coach, right? Coaching is a big aspect of leading. And so I couldn't agree more with your thoughts there. You talk about transition, and so I want to kind of go back to a comment you made around fortune, which I think this is interesting because Sarah and I actually have a very similar career history. We actually both worked at Fortune as well. And later on, which we're going to get into in a minute, ad tech. But you mentioned working with a lot of white males, right? That's very common in this industry. I think we're still very much a male dominated industry, white male for that matter. And it's amazing to see women such as yourself have success and breakthrough. I would love to talk a little bit about like any advice or maybe lessons that you learned along the way being of that female rising star within the walls of, whether that was the Wall Street Journal or later on in your career as you rose to chief revenue officer at an ad tech company.
So, yeah, I think that from an advice perspective, I think I spent too much time trying to be one of the boys, honestly. And not that it didn't help on it, it did. But I think when I really started getting traction for myself was when I started to really lean into the things that I bring to the table that are valuable, maybe because of experience that doesn't matter if it was male or female. And then other qualities that I have because I am female. And when I started leaning into that, I think that is when really I started to take off a little bit more and not trying to be something I wasn't.
I love that. I think women possess something very innate, like EIQ, right? You hear that quite often, but that emotional side of women really can be of value in the workplace, especially as you're leading sales teams, which we all know salespeople are very dynamic people, right? Like they have their highs, they have their lows, and each is unique. And so to be able to lead with empathy, whether that comes from the lens of I've been in your shoes, I started in sales as an individual contributor, or whether that's something else. I think that's something that's unique, not maybe entirely unique, but definitely comes through the lens of the makeup of the female a little bit more often maybe than men. And that can go a long way.
It's why diversity is needed. Yes. All kinds of diversity, right? Not just gender diversity, but all kinds of diversity, because we actually do all bring different things to the table based on our experience, but also our experience as human beings that are just completely different because we've walked a different path in this life. And it is so important to bring what's unique about you to the table, because that's the thing that is actually valuable. And if you look at all the stats about the impact, particularly around female leadership to companies, we increase the bottom line in every single way. So there ought to be almost no hesitancy on our part to bring that, because it really does make a huge difference. And it's the mix of people that is the thing. If you had an all-female team, it would just be just as bad, as an all anything. I guess this is another piece of advice. Bring what you've got your unique value to the proposition, but also find a place that values it.
I love that. Don't shy away from it. I think that's great. You're right. I mean, it's diversity at large, right? It's extremely important. Something we talk about quite a bit as I'm a part of your community, 1490, which we'll get into in a moment. But we were talking the other day, actually a little bit earlier today, around our children, right? We have young women growing up in the house, and it starts really early, somewhere around the middle school years, maybe late elementary, where they truly do start to get very catty with each other. And I think that's something that's interesting about women, and that kind of threads through our entire lifetime, whether that be in your personal life later or in the career and in the corporate walls. I see that women don't tend to be cheerleaders for each other. We always talk about this male energy, that frat club that exists. We know it exists. And I think for women, we tend to almost fear each other, or maybe feel that we're threatened by each other. And I don't love that. I don't understand why we don't bond, come together, empower each other, lift each other up, because you brought this stat up to me, which was there are only roughly 10% of females sitting in the CEO suite. But to your point a moment ago, they're driving 123% more in terms of revenue outcome for their companies versus
Yeah.
the men that are sitting in that same seat. In the last 10 years, that 10%, it's only doubled. That's just insane
Right.
to me. I think about the doers and what we bring to the table every day. I think that somehow we're getting in our own way.
Yeah. Well, there's two aspects to it, right? Because what you're saying is true. We have that in us, and that we all have experiences of, whether it's mean girls or just not being accepted or being overly intimidated to be vulnerable enough to be asked to be accepted in some way, to put ourselves out there. And and we have pockets of experiences where women really do that, and then they really thrive. And I think that's more and more the case, as if you compare it to when I sort of grew up in the industry. There were only that one spot, and as you mentioned, there's like now there's 10%. Well, great. It's something. And if you look a little bit lower in the ranks, we're getting there in terms of senior leadership. But yes, the percentages are ridiculous compared to what we bring to the table. But I do think that there is more of a kind of draft of women really understanding how important it is for us to have our own tribes and to have women supporting women, and how much farther we can go together than we can. And you've heard me say this before. There's a great Sally Krawcheck quote that I love of: men have played careers as a team sport and women have played it as a solo sport. And
Mm.
there's lots of reasons that you mentioned for that. But if we can take our cue from that and turn everything that we're doing into a team sport, we would be absolutely unstoppable.
So true. I love that you said a tribe, because that's really what you're building right now, is a tribe of your own. And I think this is a really great time to share what you're doing now and give a little bit of context to maybe why you
Yeah.
stepped out of the corporate world. I mean, you were the chief revenue officer of a leading ad tech company, and it seems like everything was going for you, all the all the winding your sail, so to speak, right? But you decided to step out and become a founder of Project 1490. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Project 1490 is a relatively new leadership community for women with kind of a unique twist on it. What we do is get women out of their comfort zones in kind of a really fun way. And we teach outdoor skills to things like poker, archery, building fires, chopping wood, things that maybe if you are from a city and have a great career, you may not have gotten the opportunity to do. But we do them together. And what's happening is, so instead of all those networking events that you come to and you feel like I got to go be impressive now, and you have all those sort of awkward moments of trying to see, if you can connect with other people. This structure, women come and they don't know. They don't know how to do the stuff. They've never, maybe since summer camp, been introduced to things that we're doing. So by the time we have this really elegant dinner and celebrate sort of what all the sort of feminine side of us, I guess, people are real, and they're able to make real connections with other women, and there's very intimate real conversations happening. And to me, that's how we form those real relationships, and we get over what intimidates us, what, like we're unsure of ourselves in terms of who can I connect with here, and we have an experience together. And so it's kind of it's that's what it's based on. We have lots of different kinds of ways that we do that. And then there's, the online component sort of keeps people connected in between. But it's really addressing like all the ways that we can build our own confidence and then apply that to our careers.
I love it. a member myself. And I couldn't be more happy to have found this community because it truly is a community of people that not only are like-minded, but just really want to lean in and help each other. But I'm curious because you're at the top of the industry and one of those few females that do get there. You and I actually kind of bonded on that same very fact. I think there's going to be people out there that are curious to what motivated you? How was the in terms of your timing? Was it something that really kind of said, hey, this is it. I'm ready to make this shift and go this direction. That would be really interesting to understand.
Yeah, it was over the period of a long time.
Okay.
There was a process involved. And it started, the original idea started because I spent 7 years living in Montana. After I worked at Fortune magazine, I took a vacation there by myself and was like, what is this all about? So I moved there and I had the experiences a lot that I'm talking about sharing now. I was, learned how to bow hunt and snowboard and kayak and built a house and lived off chopped firewood and
Wow.
had a lot of adventures.
Mhm.
And I was so astonished by what I was capable of that I just never thought I would do. And I found it so empowering. And I'd had the idea back then to do something around teaching women some of the things that I had learned so that they could feel empowered and they could take that back into their lives and their careers. And I ended up getting divorced out in Montana and I moved back to New York City, kind of under duress and went back into advertising and just climbed, really survival mode.
Mhm.
Then I had kids and a mortgage and I just kept going.
Yeah.
But this idea really kind of stuck with me and kind of haunted me along the way. And when it was time for me to leave my role as CRO, I was like, how much longer do I have
Yeah.
to make this dream come true?
Right.
And I went all in and said, I'm going to find out if other people are like me and would want something like this. So I had some tests, days of badassery events, and the response was incredible. And
Wow.
people were like, "Oh, you're on to something," you know.
Yeah.
And so that really encouraged me to build it and bring people like you in, which I agree. The red thread through all of the Project 1490 community members is they are women of substance.
Yeah.
And they're different levels and different industries, but you don't read the website and see archery and
Right.
fishing and all of that sort of stuff and if you're like, oh, that's cool, then there's just something about you. So we're really collecting an incredible group of women, of which I'm really happy that you're a part of.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a great community and just getting to know you outside of career has been phenomenal for me. I sit in Atlanta. The majority sit up in New York area so they can come together and bond probably in an easier way than I am from remote. But I will say you've done a phenomenal job for making this a virtual network as well. You said you had to test it, right? You tested an idea. I think that's extremely important. A lot of people just kind of jump and go all in. And that can be extremely challenging for a lot of reasons. So you tested, you validated. Obviously, you're taking some great learnings from your career along this journey. But what I have also realized is that you adapt
Yeah.
and because the community is growing and I would love to see this community go nationwide, global, wherever it can take
Yeah.
you. But for those of us, again, that maybe can't come together for all the great events that you host, there are a lot of interactions for us online. And we've built many different smaller kind of communities or circles, I guess, where right now I'm part of a book club, or it's actually a writing circle, to be honest. We're kind of helping on both sides, meaning there's many of us that want to write a book. So we're kind of spending some time together and understanding, unpacking that, and also just writing together. And I think that's really cool. It's different and not, I don't know that I've seen that anywhere else. It's to your point, when we are going through this corporate journey and we're networking and we're going to these industry events, they're very industry focused. And it's very much about understanding what's going on in the industry or making sure you're introducing yourself and networking. And that's all in the premise of who you are within that industry. I feel like this removes all of that. And we're truly getting to know each other outside of kind of the corporate walls or that corporate identity.
Yeah. It's great because when people come to the events, I don't let them introduce themselves using their title or their job description. And, because we're at the root of it, we're not our jobs, right? We're human beings on the planet, and we're all striving for different things in our lives. And I think that's really, as I learned to try to articulate what is the essence of Project 1490. I think really it's about the same kind of journey that I had of this. I have an idea. I got on this train when I was really young. Maybe I got off and got back on it at some point, but at some point it was running 100 million miles an hour. And I was like, but wait, is this the right train? For me, it served me very well for a very long time, but is this it? And I think a lot of people, like, you're going to write a book, you're starting a podcast, like there are people who've come to retreats and they're starting LLCs and they got their book published, and lots of different, they've asked for severance and learned how to negotiate it right, like lots of stuff like that, because it's what we're really trying to do is fan the flames of what the women in the community really want.
Yeah.
And how do we get you there? Whatever it is. We've got somebody else who's like, should I go into politics? Like
Right.
all of these things, but what is your passion? And let's spend the rest of our lives doing that. And if it's the right train that you're on, great. Let's see how far you can go. And we do that in by both sort of building the set of balls that you need. Sorry, I should probably correct that. But to
Yeah.
go and do it right by building the confidence to believe in yourself and have that self-reliance, and then also have a group of women around you that you believe in.
Yeah.
So when they believe in you, you believe it.
No, I love that. It's so true. It's like a swagger. I think that something I noticed is we are also, some of us that are older, not all of us, but some of us are a little bit older within this community. And we're almost serving as a little bit of a mentor to some of those that are kind of rising the ranks and still, to your point, on the train that they love and just need a little bit of guidance, a little bit of help, whether that's negotiating skills or maybe they're looking to make a pivot from publisher to ad tech, whatever that journey is for them. But I've really enjoyed spending time with some of those individuals and just sharing what I can, giving pieces of advice and lessons along the way.
Yeah. Good.
So it's amazing. But with that, let's talk about maybe some lessons that you've learned along the way or pieces of advice that you want to give back to your younger self, maybe.
Yeah, when I think a real pivot for me in my career came at some part when I'd returned to New York City, and I'd always been in this younger position, I was the youngest person in the room always. And finally, I was in my early 30s then, and at some point I realized that everybody else who I had thought like had all the answers and knew what everything that they were talking about were really just guessing, and it was a really great revelatory moment for me because I realized that my guess could be just as good as their guess if I was equally or more informed, and so there was like a sort of a before and after for me when I realized that like not everybody knows what they're talking about, like, and then I could start really finding my own voice. And I think I see that in younger people, not just women, but that they think everybody else at the table knows the answer, or
Right.
that, but their contributions, especially when you're in your early career, you're in the weeds of the business, and your perspective actually matters
Mhm.
because all those leaders have gotten out of the weeds for a while. And that's when you kind of get these crazy decisions that are made that the people then sort of doing the work go like, what are we doing? So,
Oh my gosh, that's so relatable with some
yeah.
um, maybe not so distant memories of very senior executive leaders. Well, that's a really great piece of advice. Speak up, right? Like have a voice, share your experiences because you're right. Like they're in it deep, and truly their voice matters the most. Um, so in closing, then we like to close with a question. When did you realize your corporate baddie moment?
I Oh my gosh. I think it was really when I had taken over a department in despair at some point in my career, and it was a real turnaround job. And I, with the help of people on my team, really could see like we can fix this in 2 steps, right? We had an idea, we had started to build the culture that we needed to get there. And there were 2 moments. One was when I really brought the team together, and this had been a, toxic culture, all kinds of stuff. And I could lay out the vision of where we were going and how we were going to get there. And really it was to find the believers. And I knew I had a couple already. And I remember saying in the meeting, that's the bus. If you're looking for a different bus, then you should go somewhere else.
Right.
But if you want on this bus and you're ready to work, then we're going places. And I had said we're going to be the best in the business. And I said that when we were ranked like really close to the bottom of what we were doing in the industry. And we had like the worst renewal rate, like all this stuff was bad. And it was 9 months later, Ad Age named us the best in the business. And I couldn't have
Wow.
predicted, but it was probably one of the most satisfying moments because there were people who did get off the bus, and that
Yeah,
was good.
that's
It was
great. That's what you
good.
want.
And the people who stayed got really, eventually you get people who, if I stop driving it, they're going to take the wheel because they believe in it so much.
Have you ever read The Energy Bus?
No.
Up. You would think you had. You would think you have written it. The energy bus, I actually gave it to my entire team at Yieldmo because we were literally at that place, like that cornerstone moment where it was like you need to get on the bus or you need to get off the bus. And you truly do want those to get off the bus that are not
Yeah, that's
believers.
right. For this little fledgling department that was going down the tubes, all of a sudden we were the department that was booing the rest of the place. Like we were making up for a lot of lack
Yeah.
in other places that were happening, and we were making a ton of money. And so, this was in a much bigger company. So the finance department started paying attention to us, which I'd been like kind of flying under the radar and doing what I thought I needed to do. And they, started emailing me to ask me questions about how I was spending money and margin and all kinds
Oh,
of.
wow.
And they couldn't get to me, so they went to another more junior person on my team, and they said, we need demanding all of this information. And they said to me, well, what do you want me to tell him? And I said, tell him to fuck off. And I walked away, and I know because this woman worked for me several times now. And she said, do I really tell him that? And I realized that like I had the gravitas at that point to be able to say it and mean it, because all the decisions that we were making for the sake of revenue, and it was working.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't really about me. It was really more about we have the leg to stand on here, and you're not going to come spreadsheeting me to death.
I think that's a really awesome moment to share. And thank you for sharing that with us. I have enjoyed having you on the podcast today. I think you are a phenomenal woman and have a really amazing career journey, but more so, I'm excited for what's to come for you with Project 1490. So I encourage our listeners to, I don't know, what's the website? I don't know it exactly. Is it www.project1490.com?
Yep.
Did I nail it? All right, I nailed it. I encourage you to go and take a look. And if you're interested, reach to Sarah for more information. But it's a great community, one that I love to be a part of, and I know I'd love to see it grow and to see the success that you're bringing to the table has been amazing.
Thanks so much, Jen. And it's great watching you on this transition. It's so wonderful, and you're doing it.
Well, I'm trying,
Yeah,
but it's great to have friendlies like you in the industry to come share your voice and story. So I appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone listening today. And we hope you'll listen to the next episode of The Corporate Baddie.